Hello everybody, Roguefox here, and welcome back to another episode of Redstone Basics. In today's video, we are going to be going over redstone components such as repeaters, comparators, dispensers, droppers, hoppers, and things like that. In the last episode, we covered the redstone basics such as where to find redstone, we covered power sources, and we covered signal strength of redstone. So if you missed that video, I highly recommend checking that out. A link to it will be popping up in the top right corner. But with that, let's go ahead and jump into redstone components. The first redstone component we're going to look at today is the redstone repeater. You can make this with 3 stone blocks, 2 redstone torches, and redstone dust in this order. The repeater is used to extend redstone signals, add delays, and control signal direction. I briefly covered using redstone repeaters to extend signal strength in the last video, but just to briefly recap this, we're going to go back down to here. This is going to be our power source. And then we have 15 blocks from the power source before we lose our signal strength. So in this demonstration, this is our signal strength of 1. Once we get to the 16th block away from our power source, we lose all power. But to keep it going, we simply place down a repeater like you see here, and then that will boost or extend the signal strength back to 15 and go all the way back down to 0 once again. Now, there are a couple ways we can use to get a couple more blocks out of this. So in these 2 examples, we have our power sources right here. We have our signal strength of 15 going all the way down to 1. And in this example, this is going to go into this solid block here. A repeater on the other side, which is being picked up through that. As you can see, the repeater is being powered. That's going to power this block. And then start our signal strength at 15 once again, going all the way back down to 1 and powering this redstone lamp. And if we really wanted to, we could place another repeater and keep doing it all the way down as far as we'd like. In this example, we simply get rid of the block that's in between the redstone dust and the repeater, and then the rest is the same. It's going to power this block, start at 15, go all the way back down to 1, and power this block here to power redstone lamp. But as you can tell, we do get an extra block of length out of doing it this way. We can also use repeaters to add delay. So I gave examples here. By default, the repeater is set to 1 tick of delay or 1/10 of a second. We have 2 ticks. All we simply do is click on it just like this to set the delays. So 2 ticks, we have a 2/10 of a second delay, 3 ticks, 3/10 of a second, and then 4 ticks gives us 4/10 of a second delay. And then I laid out this little example right here. We have repeaters set to 1 tick, 2 ticks, 3 ticks, 4 ticks, and then 4 ticks and 1 to give us a 1/2 second of delay. And if I press the button, you can see how they all turn on and off sequentially, just like that, due to the delays. And that's how we use repeaters for delay. Another nice part about repeaters is that it controls the direction our redstone is going. So right here, we have this T-shape. If I were to power it, it's going in all directions. But in this T-shape, I have a repeater here. If we push it, it's only going the way I want it to go. And this is a good time to talk about which way repeaters face. So when we set delay, it goes to the back of it, like you see right here. You can also see this little arrow pointing forward. And also, one thing that will give it away is if you have it backwards like this and you try to power it, nothing is going to happen. So these are just ways to tell which way your repeater is facing. Repeaters can also be locked in its on and off state. So what I mean by that is if I flip my power source here, it powers our repeater, and then it's powering our redstone dust. Now, if I power this repeater, you can see it is now locked. So if I take this away, this is still locked into an on position. But if we do it the other way, so let's say this is off and then I lock it. Now, if I try to power it this way, we're not going to get any power. And we can also use a comparator to do this as well. Now, what is a practical use for a locking repeater? Well, what I mainly use it for are for farms like my sugarcane farm, my stone, cobblestone generators, and things like that, where I use an observer and piston setup like this. Now, what this is going to do, let me go ahead and take away the repeater that locks it. If we don't lock this repeater, what's going to happen is if the sugarcane grows or the cobblestone or stone generates right here, the piston will move it out of the way. But what's going on now is the observer is constantly detecting the piston firing, and then it's just making a circuit or a loop like this that will never end, which is why I throw in a repeater to lock it. So now if I give this example, let's say the sugarcane grows, cobblestone, stone generates, it will only fire once. So what's happening is the observer is detecting that. It's powering this block, it's powering this redstone, and in 1 tick, it's firing the piston. But at the same time, 2/10 a second later or a tick later, it's going to lock that repeater, so it cuts off that cycle from happening. So I'll do it from a top view just to give a better idea of what's going on here. So we do that, and then you can see that the repeater locks itself, and then we don't have that endless cycle like you just saw. Now that we covered repeaters, let's move into our next component, the comparator. Next, we're going to look at redstone comparators. To make this, you need 3 stone, 3 redstone torches, and another quartz in this order. A comparator is a redstone component that reads signal strength, compares inputs, and can even detect how full a container is. Basically, a comparator has a lot of uses. Now, there are 2 different settings for this. We have compare mode and subtract mode. Compare mode is indicated by the front torch being off, and then subtract mode is indicated by the front torch being on. And then we can toggle through these by simply clicking on the comparator like this. I will admit, comparators can be a little intimidating at first. So what we have here is a comparator in compare mode as indicated by the redstone torch being off. Now what's going to happen here is the comparator is going to check the signal strength of the redstone behind it. So I have 2 different ones. I have a couple different examples I'll go over. So if I flip this one, this is going to be our power source, and this is going to be our signal strength of 15, which means we have a 15 signal strength going into the back of the comparator, which means this is going to power all the way down to our 15 blocks. And as we discussed earlier, once we get down to our 16th block, we have a signal strength of 0. Now the comparator is also going to detect the signal coming into the side of it against the signal going into the back of it. So if I turn this on, we have our power source. This is 15. We have 15 and 15, which means this is going to allow the signal to still carry through like you see right here. Now, if I go ahead and turn this off, we're going to turn on this lever. This is going to be a signal strength of 15. We're going to go down to 14, which means we have a 14 signal strength going into the back of the comparator, and that's being compared against the 15 signal strength that's going into the side of the comparator, which is not allowing a redstone signal to go through, as you see here. Basically, when the comparator is in compare mode, if the signal strength is stronger coming in from the side than it is from the rear, we will not get an output. But if the side signal strength is weaker or is even off in comparison to the signal strength coming in from the rear, it will allow the signal to pass through. Now, there is one more thing about this. If I go ahead and turn off the power going into the side, we have our signal strength of 14 going in once again, but notice that it's not going down all the way to the 15 blocks. It's actually stopping right here at 14 blocks. So if we come back to the beginning, let's go ahead and compare these side by side. So here's our 15 signal strength going into the back of the comparator. That goes down to 15. And then once we have 14, it's only going down 14 blocks. And then we have subtract mode. Subtract mode is going to be indicated by the redstone torch being on the front of the comparator. So for this example, we have our signal strength of 15 running into the back. And what subtract mode does is it subtracts the input from the side from the input in the rear. So on this example, I have circuit B. That's going to give us a 14 signal strength. So we have 15, 14, 15 minus 14 gives us an output of 1. So you can see the redstone dust is being powered here, but not on the second block. And then in the second example, again, we have our signal strength of 15 going into the rear. And on the right side, we have a signal strength of 13. So 15, 14, 13, 15 minus 13 is going to give us an output of 2. So you can see 1, 2 right there. And then on the third block, it is not being powered. A comparator will also detect the amount of items in a container block or the level that it's at and give a redstone output accordingly. So you can see there are all of these blocks that I placed down, and I'm sure I probably even missed a couple, but all of these are being detected by the comparator and giving us a redstone output. So I'll go ahead and post a screenshot from the wiki of all the items that you can place in these blocks to get the output that you want. But what I'm going to do is show you the composter because it maxed out at a signal strength of 7. So if we take a look here, we have a composter at level 1 that gives us an output of 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, level 6, and I wanted to do this one on camera. So a pumpkin pie in a composter is always guaranteed to give us 1 level. So we can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and then it maxes out, and then that turns into bone meal that we can just pull like that, and then it will reset because now the container, or in this case the composter, is empty. As for practical uses, well, there are many uses for the comparator, as you can imagine, with all the blocks that we can apply them to. So what I think I'll do is post a link to my tutorial list that'll be popping up in the top right corner, so you can browse through the tutorials, check out a build that sticks out to you or interests you, and see how I use the comparator in that build. But fair warning, some of these videos are going to be old, so the audio is not going to be the best, but I highly recommend checking them out just to see how I use the comparator in my own builds. As I mentioned at the beginning of the segment, comparators can be very intimidating at first, but once you learn how to use them, they are a very useful redstone component. Next, we are going to talk about dispensers. Dispensers can be made like this with cobblestone on the outside. In the bottom center, we have redstone, and right in the center, we have ourselves a bow. So this combination will make a dispenser. Dispensers, and droppers for that matter, are a little more straightforward than repeaters and comparators. So as far as powering dispensers go, you can power it a couple different ways. You can power it with a power source on a block right next to it. So a solid block, of course, not a transparent one, which we discussed earlier. So for this example, we have this dispenser right here. If I push this button, that's going to power this block, which is then going to power this dispenser, dispensing the item you just saw there. Or we can place redstone dust on top like you see here. Now, with the way this is set up, this redstone dust, because it's on top of this dispenser, will actually power both of them, because you can think of this as the block we just powered here. So this will be, if we had a button here, that'd power that and power this. But let me just go ahead and show you. So if we push the button right here, you'll notice both of them dispense. And the same goes for this setup right here. We have the same exact thing, except it's at the bottom of this one and not on top. But because this is being directly powered into this block, that's going to power both of these. So if I push the button here, both of them will be dispensed once again. Now, I did make a note. This will be powered because redstone runs directly into it. But with this redstone line here, you can see it is not running into the side of it in this example, so it actually goes straight through, and because of that, if we try to power this, nothing is going to happen. Another thing about dispensers, and also droppers, which we'll get into later, is items placed inside them will be dispensed at random. So I have all of these different colored concrete blocks here. Notice red is going to be the first one. It could be the first one dispensed, or it can be any one of these. Again, this is going to be dispensed at random, so if I go ahead and push the button, the purple one came out, which was in the bottom left corner. So that is another feature of the dispenser. So it kind of helps if you want things to pop out at random. As I mentioned earlier, a dispenser will also use items as compared to a dropper that will just drop them. So what I've done here for this example is place an arrow here, trident, snowball, wind charge, fire charge, and an egg. Now, if I go ahead and push this, you can see all of those got used. The arrow did miss, so it didn't hit its target. But you can see by the example here, these items are being used as opposed to just being dropped, which is what the dropper will do. And that's pretty much all there is to say about dispensers. It's pretty straightforward. Again, one thing to keep in mind is dispensers will use items if they can, whereas a dropper will drop them, and we'll get into droppers in just a second. But with that, there are a bunch of uses for dispensers. So I did set up a few examples here, and of course there are more things that you can do with them. For example, we can dispense a minecart from the dispenser like that, and it'll go ahead and put it onto the track. We have a water bucket in this one. If we push it, it will let water come out, dispense the water, and we push it again, it'll take it back. Same thing with lava. We dispense the lava here. We can take the lava back, and then we can also dispense shulker boxes. So I have some shulkers in here. If we go ahead and push this button, that will dispense a shulker box like that. We also have a wool farm that we can make out of this. So if we place shears inside a dispenser, and when the sheep actually has wool on it, we can push the button here, or in this case, I have an observer to detect when the grass changes. So once the sheep eats the grass, it gets its wool back. That will be detected by the observer that's underneath, which is right there. Power this block to power this redstone. And as we just learned, it will power the dispenser, use the shears, and shear the sheep, and the wool will be collected down below. We also can make a mud farm. So if we place water bottles like this inside a dispenser, and we place dirt here and dispense the water, that will turn into mud. So that's another thing we can do. We can make mud farms, and we can also make automatic crop farms. This one is not set up to dispense things automatically, but we can place bone meal inside dispensers. And if I place my seed here, Push it once, it takes the crop to the next stage until it's ready to be harvested. Staying on the topic of farms, if we apply this to a bee's nest or a beehive, if we place shears inside the dispenser, just like we did here for the wool farm, we will get honeycombs, but if we place a bottle inside when the beehive is full, it'll give us a bottle of honey. And to kind of apply everything that we've covered so far, so we have our dispenser, we have our comparator and our repeater, and what we can actually do with this as well is make an item elevator. So we have soul sand down below, we have water sources here, and you'll also notice the bubble column. So with soul sand, this causes the column to rise, whereas a magma block would pull things down. But if we place items inside the dispenser like this, you can see it makes a nice, easy, and convenient item elevator. And for one final example, and again, there are plenty more things that you can do with the dispenser, but you can also make an armor equipper. So what I've done is place 4 dispensers down, each with a piece of different armor in it, and then I have one in the floor. And then we have a pressure plate here, so if I go ahead and just do this, it will equip all of my armor. Like I said, there are plenty of uses for dispensers, and again, the tutorial playlist that I provided should give you some examples of how you can use them. Next on the list are droppers. To make a dropper, it's very similar to the dispenser, except we don't have a bow in the center. So we have cobblestone all around the outside right here, and then in the bottom center, we have ourselves redstone dust. And that is how you make a dropper. As I mentioned in the dispenser segment, droppers will literally just drop things, whereas dispensers will use them if they can be used. Even if it's an item that can be used in a dispenser, a dropper will just drop them. So they can be powered in the same way. Just as we saw earlier, we can power it this way. That'll give us one item, but if we have the redstone dust on top, it's powering this dropper and also this one. I do have them pointing in 2 different directions. So if I push it, both of them will drop items. And then for this example, I went ahead and put down arrows because we can actually use these to transport items. So this arrow indicates that this dropper is running into this one, and then this arrow is indicating that the dropper is facing up. Now, as we just talked about, this will power up both of them. So if I look into the inventory here, we have items in this dropper, we have nothing in this dropper, but if I go ahead and push it, it'll push the item through and then out of this dropper here. And just like with the dispenser demonstration, we have the same redstone setup. We have the redstone running into the side of it like this. Now, because this dropper is facing into this one and we have it over here, it's not going to drop the item out this way. So what's going to happen is, again, we have this dropper with items. This dropper has nothing. It's still going to power both, but when we push it, nothing came out. But as you can see, the dropper took from the left one and put it into the right one. And of course, if we push it again, that will drop the item up, and then the dropper from the left will put another item into this dropper here. And of course, if the redstone is not running into the dropper, like we did with the dispenser, it is not going to work. Like the dispenser, the dropper is going to drop items at random. So again, we have our colored concrete inside the dropper, and if we were to push the button, a random one is going to be dispensed. So for the dispenser, it was the bottom left, but now for this one, it's going to be the middle left. So again, droppers will dispense or drop items at random. We can also use droppers to place items in containers. So just like you saw with this example here with this dropper placing an item into this dropper, we can actually use the dropper to place things into items like chests, barrels, shulker boxes, chiseled bookshelves, and also pots. And I do want to give an example of a practical use for this. So as I mentioned, droppers are great for transporting items. So what I made here is a dropper elevator, or it's also known as a dropper vader. So if I go ahead, we're going to grab these 5 dirt. If we just place them in there, it's going to go up through all the droppers. And as you can see, it is now spitting it out from the top and giving me all of my blocks back. The last redstone component we're going to look at in this video is the hopper. And you can make a hopper with a chest in the middle like you see here, and then 5 iron ingots laid out in this V-shape type of pattern. So what are hoppers good for? Well, hoppers are good for many things. Their main function is to transport items from one place to another, so you can use these in farms, item sorters, just to name a couple things. So how this works is we have this chest here, we have our hopper. If we place an item inside the chest like this, the hopper is going to pull it and bring it down into the hopper. Now, typically you do want this to go somewhere because if you don't have anywhere for the hopper to go, it's just going to stay there. And the direction of the hoppers are also important. In this case here, as indicated by the arrow, this hopper is pointing down. This hopper here is pointing to the left. This hopper here is pointing to the right. And then I just have my note here that I just mentioned earlier that the hopper does need to go somewhere or the item will just sit on the inside. So if we come back here, there are different things that we can use. So hoppers can pull from different containers like chests, barrels, shulker boxes, composters, furnaces, dispensers, droppers, basically any sort of redstone component that you can put items into, a hopper can pull from. Hoppers can also pull from certain partial blocks as well, and I'll get to that in just a moment. As I just mentioned, you usually want this to go somewhere, so in this case we have a chest, a hopper, and then a chest at the bottom. So to demonstrate this, if we place the dirt block into the chest, the hopper pulls that out, and then drops it down into the chest below. And as far as the composter goes, as we saw earlier in the last demonstration, we can turn this into bone meal once this gets to a max level. So if we go ahead and do this, that turns into bone meal. The hopper collects it and then drops the bone meal into the chest down below. And then we have our partial blocks, like I just mentioned. There aren't a lot of them, but mud is a very good one. And what partial blocks means is that we have a solid block that you see right here, but it's not necessarily a full block. So they look very similar, but let me go ahead and just demonstrate this for you. So if we have this piece of dirt, we throw it on top of the mud, and you'll notice that it did get collected by the hopper and then pulled it through down below, like you see here. But if I go ahead and remove the mud, let's put the dirt block on top, and then I try to throw something on here, notice it is not pulling it through, it's just going to sit on top. Just to go on a quick rabbit trail, but still related to what I'm talking about, is determining what is a solid or partial block. Like I said, there aren't a lot of them. I think the only other real partial block that looks like a solid block is soul sand. So, as you can see here, I stepped onto the mud, my shoes disappeared, and that's why the items can be pulled through with a hopper. But when we place it on dirt, notice how you can see my shoes again. That is why we were not able to pull an item through the dirt block. So something to keep in mind, and in my personal opinion, this is a great block to use, and I'm talking about mud, because you can have mob farms, skeletons, zombies dropping on top of this, you can collect their loot that way, or if you're doing a plant farm like flowers, firefly bushes, or things like that, you can actually plant it on top of mud, and it will grow on top, be harvested, and then be collected all on the same block, and you actually save yourself some resources, because typically with this, you would have to put a hopper minecart underneath. So it would be a hopper here, hopper minecart, and then your solid block. But with a mud block, all you have to do is put the mud block, a hopper, and then your collection system. So you save yourself a little bit of space and some resources. You can also place low slabs on top of hoppers like you see right here, and it'll still pull the item through just like it did with the mud. I originally had a shulker box here, but that was a little bit redundant because I already showed the containers here. But one thing I did think about were slabs. So this is another thing that you can use, like if you're doing a mob farm. So you have your mobs on top of this, they drop their loot, and then that'll be pulled through the hopper as well, and then go down into whatever collection system that you have. You can also use redstone to lock hoppers, so this is what this example is right here. Now, going back to what we just talked about, the directions of hoppers, we have this hopper facing to the right into this one, then we have this hopper facing to the left, so both of these hoppers are running into each other, and what should be happening, we have a dirt block here. It should just be going back and forth freely, but because we have this lever here that is turned on, it is locking this hopper. And just to go back to what we talked about comparators not too long ago, because we have an item inside the hopper that is being detected by the comparator, giving us a redstone output, so it's powering this block, which is allowing this lamp to be on. Now, if I go ahead and turn the lever off, now you can see that the item is going back and forth, and the comparators are detecting the item going into the hopper, which is why we have the flashing that we do there. And if I open up the hopper, you can see it going in and out like that. So if I power this one, if we lock this hopper, the item is now locked into this one, and it's not allowing it to move into this one, and vice versa. Like you saw, we lock this one, now the item is locked into this hopper, and it's not allowed to go out. Just to briefly review what I've covered so far, I went ahead and made this little build right here. So what's going to happen is I'm going to place the item in the chest, that's going to be pulled into the loop by the hopper here, and it's just going to drop down, go around, and then go into this dropper elevator or dropper vader, push it back up to this hopper, and just start making a loop here. And then we have the comparators to detect when the item is passing through these certain hoppers. But let's go ahead and place the dirt item in. So we can see it making its way around the loop, left, bottom of the dropper vader, right there, back around. And again, talking about locking hoppers with redstone. So if I go ahead and do this, this redstone block is locking this hopper. So that's keeping the item there from going forward. And then if we take it away, it's just going to go around once again. Before ending the video, what I thought I would try to do is make one build that incorporated almost everything that we learned. It's not going to use all the mechanics, but it is going to use the majority of the components. I think if anything, it's not using the dispenser, but it's using everything else. So what I have here is a hopper, which is going to be a container item. And remember, comparators can detect items that are in containers, such as a hopper. So what I did is place an item that stacks in 64, like this dirt block. That's going to give us a redstone output of 1. In this hopper, I placed in a sword. So any non-stackable item, such as a sword, any other weapon or tool, that will give us a redstone output of 3. And what I did is I made this circuit right here, which most of the time I do like to use for a quick pulse. So if I push the button, going back to what we covered in the first video, we get a quick pulse just like that. So what's happening here is I push the button that's going to power the dropper, and it's going to pick one of these items at random. So an output of 1 or an output of 3, like this. It's going to drop it or push it up into the hopper here. That's going to be detected by the comparator and then give us a redstone output from here. But at the same time, since the hopper is pointing back into the dropper, it's going to drop the item back into the dropper. Hopefully that made sense, but let me give you a quick demonstration here. So if I push it, there was the sword, that's the output of 3. Push it again, it gave us the item that stacks in 64, giving us an output of 1. I have the same exact build right here, except this time I introduced the repeaters and the locking repeaters, and also a target block. The target block I'm only using because it directs redstone into it, like you see right here. So that way, if we get our output of 3, it's going to power this repeater here, power the block, and give us an output. But at the same time, it's going to power this repeater, and we have 1 tick, 2 ticks. So in 2 ticks, it's going to lock this repeater, which is set to 3 ticks. So technically, this redstone power line here is going to act faster than this one, thus locking the repeater. Again, I know that was a lot of information. Let me go ahead and demonstrate it. So if we push it, you can see only this light turned on as opposed to both of them turning on here. Let's do it again. There's the first one, so that was our dirt. There's the sword, and because we have it locking, so let's try to get it from here. There's the 1, there's the lock right there, and that way only one of these gives us an output. And with that, we have reached the end of today's video. Unfortunately, we covered so much, I'm not going to be able to recap all of it, but what I'll make sure to do is put chapters down in the video, so if you want to go over a certain section, you can always click on that chapter. It'll take you right to the beginning of that segment that we went over. But we covered repeaters, we covered comparators like you see here, and as you can see, there are so many things that we can use these components for. We covered dispensers, we have our droppers, and then finally at the end, we made our way to the hoppers. Even with all the redstone components that we covered today, there are still a few more we need to go over. So in the next video, we're going to take a look at the piston, sticky piston, target block, and redstone torch. With that, this is going to be the end of today's video. I will go ahead and put a playlist of all my tutorials right here on the screen for you to check out. Highly recommend checking all those out so you can see how I've worked all of those different components that we covered in today's video amongst all of the different builds I've done over the years. Fair warning, some of the videos are a little old, so the audio quality is not the best, but I am making it a goal of mine to go through all those videos, rework them, and update them if need be. But I definitely want to do them so the audio quality is at the standard that it's at today. And with that being said, everyone, this is going to be the end of today's video. I really hope you all enjoyed. This has been Rogue Fox, and I will see you in the next one.